at me with sword and spear, but I come in the name of the God of Israel. Yes! Right between the eyes! Did you see that? Anyone? Of course not. Okay then, one more time. Tally, not now! I'm trying to protect us from this Philistine. Whoa! No, not that way. Come on. Back to your mom. Right, Philistine. Oh, wait! Right between the eyes. Oh, of course. That one you saw. Tally! Tally, no! I'm coming, girl! Whoa, easy! Shira! I will bring her home safely. Whoa! Hey, whoa, Tally, wait, no! There you go. I'm almost there. Whoa! Okay. Oh! Tally, stop! No! Oh, that doesn't help. That does. Stop. Thank you. Yena haleni nafshi yeshove yancheni b'magalet tzedek leman shemo.
What you have just watched is a concept short or a musical animated feature film on the story of David, and our vision is to tell it in the same quality as movies like Tangled and Frozen. This is more than a movie. This is a movement to join people from all over the world to try and make the world's most watched animated theatrical release. You can show your interest in investing by going to angel.com/David. Growing up in the wild of Africa was the most incredible experience, and it was there that I bumped into the most amazing character of God and fell in love with him. At the same time, I was reading David's story, and it just really struck me. On one particular canoe trip on the Zambezi River, where you could canoe for days and not see a human being, I was reading the scriptures and I read, "I found in David, son of Jesse, a man after my own heart." And I thought how amazing it would be to do a film that could give people all over the world a glimpse into God's heart. We grew up on a farm that had no electricity. I only saw my first film when I was 14 years old, and it was such an electric experience. I was blown away by the power of film and the power of story to connect with people and move people. And from that day, I became passionate to tell a story on the life of David. The question is, can a group of farmers from Africa make a global hit that's going to reach the world? This is in and of itself an incredible David versus Goliath story.
There's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And in order to tell a story as big as David, we need people from all around the world to come together.
Over the last 20 years, Jackie and I have just been blown away by how God has miraculously drawn talent to us. Now we have the most awesome, high-quality team.
Like Nathan Stanton, who spent 22 years at Pixar, Jonas Myron, a Grammy Award-winning musician, Borja Mentora, a Disney animation alumni, other talent from massive films like Big Hero 6, Tangled, Finding Nemo, Zootopia, Moana, Prince of Egypt, and many more.
Our first breakout hit is Jungle Beat, an incredible and beautiful show. On our YouTube channel, we get over 2 billion views a year. We've got 7 million subscribers. We also recently released our first animated feature film called Jungle Beat the Movie. And incredibly, it was on Netflix's top 10 for over 2 weeks, both live action and animated feature films in the US. We are also doing a theatrical release of Jungle Beat the Movie in China later this year, and are in production of Jungle Beat the Movie 2. What really excites me is if you take Jungle Beat the Movie, we produced that for $5 million. And I'd really encourage you to go and watch it on Netflix to see the quality of movie we produce for that price. And just imagine the quality of movie we could produce on David with the proper budget. With David, we considered the route of engaging with Hollywood, and there is significant interest down that route. But we really felt that from a creative point of view, we need to stay the head and not the tail of this project. And it's a slingshot, like David went with a slingshot to fight Goliath. We really believe that the strategy needs to be outside the Hollywood system for it to work. In this vein, we are thrilled to be working with Angel Studios for distribution. Angel Studios did the TV series The Chosen, which has become the world's biggest TV series on the life of Jesus Christ. The Chosen has generated hundreds of millions of views and tens of millions of dollars. We've already got $19 million of investments and need another $35 million to complete this project. We need your help to bring God's heart to the world through the story of David. Go to angel.com/David to show your support for this project now. And let's join together to try and make the world's most watched animated theatrical release. Welcome everyone to this live stream about David, the animated feature film. And my name is Phil Cunningham. I'm one of the directors on the animated feature film. And tonight we've got a super special guest. And he's not just, we've had some amazing special guests on this live stream, but tonight's special guest is even more special because he's not just a special guest, but he's also coming onto the project as an executive producer on the movie. So tonight, the fans of Tim Tebow who are on this live stream, I'd really like to welcome you, because to many of us who know Tim, he is a modern day David. He has taken on many giants, many challenges. And when we looked for executive producers on this movie, we specifically looking for people who bring the David heart, because this movie is all about heart, and David is all about God's heart, and this huge big heart. And Tim just fits that incredibly well. And so we are so excited to welcome Tim as a special guest. I'm going to actually call him on screen in a moment, but not just yet, but just to tee it up and say we're excited to have him on this live stream. We're even more excited to have him as executive producer for the long haul on this movie. Very quickly, what is David? Just for those of you who are new to this, David is an animated feature film. And the best way I can try and describe it to you is if you can imagine Prince of Egypt and a movie like Tangled, so the energy and the fun and the adventure and the entertainment of Tangled, and then the authenticity and the beauty of Prince of Egypt. And if you combine those two movies, that hopefully gives you a bit of a picture of the kind of trying to create. Our passion is quality, We are super passionate about quality. We've been building towards this point for more than 20 years. And we really want to make an animated feature film that competes with some of the best Disney, Pixar, and DreamWorks movies. And that's a real goal of ours, just to say. The other thing I'd say about the David movie, which is so exciting, is that it's got an amazing musical thread, or more than a thread, core element. It is a musical. And we know that David was the most amazing songwriter himself. He wrote over half the Psalms in the Bible. He himself called himself Israel's singer of songs. So authentically, we can bring music into this beautiful movie. And I've said this in one of the other live streams, but if they can make an amazing musical out of P.T. Barnum's life, we can surely make an amazing musical out of David's life. So that's the other thing, just to paint a picture of the kind of film. Just so for those of you who don't know, animated feature films take a long time to make. Typically 4 to 7 years is the period. Luckily, you're joining the story well into that adventure. So what we're left with, if we can continue to raise our funding as we've planned, we should finish the movie at the end of 2024, and we'll release the movie in 2025. So there's already been a lot of investment in this movie, just so you know. It's a $55 million budget, and we've already had $25 million invested. And what we're doing tonight and on the live streams coming up is we, in what you call a gauging interest phase or testing the water phase. So if you want to know more about the movie, you can go to angel.com/David, and you can find out more about how to potentially get involved. Once we've gauged interest, and if that's all going well, then we can go to our next crowdfunding raise. But you can go to angel.com/David to find out more about this movie. The other thing I want to say tonight, quickly, before we invite Tim onto screen, is if you've got questions, please feel free to pop them on the live stream on the social media channels, and then at the end we'll have a little Q&A. And I'd love to, if we can answer, we'll gladly answer questions. So questions are more than welcome. So please just hit us with questions as we go. The other thing, very quickly before I invite Tim, and I'm going to ask him this question when I do invite him on, is can you guys post? If David was playing American football, what position do you think he would be on the field? So while you start just giving us your answers on that, I'm going to invite Tim onto screen with me. And many of you know him. He was a quarterback for Denver Broncos and for New York Jets. But Tim is way more than an amazing athlete. He's an amazing human being who's taken on amazing giants in his life. So Tim, I'd just love to invite you onto the live stream with us tonight, and thank you for joining us. Tim, it's great to have you. Welcome, eh?
Yeah, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Phil. I just first want to start out by saying thanks for your vision. Thanks for having such a big vision, because I a lot of times think a big vision comes from a big God. And you know what? You believe our God is a big God. And one of the reasons that David is such a hero of mine isn't because of all the things he accomplished. It's because you can see in Scripture so many times that he had confidence because he had confidence in such a big God, and I'm just say thank you so much for having a big vision, for trying to rally believers and rally the church behind this, and thank you for making something that is going to be, our hope and our prayer is going to be something that's going to impact people around the world. We share so many things in common, and for everybody watching, we had the chance to hang out last time I was in South Africa, and we share a common love for South Africa because my wife's from South Africa. But we have all those things in common. But what's so special though is we have so much in purpose of wanting to tell this story to impact people all around the world, because the story of David, I just think, is a story of highs and lows and love and heartbreak and sadness and amazing ups and downs. But ultimately, it is the story of serving a big God and serving a God that isn't looking for perfect people, but is looking for willing people, and a God that is also loving, but is also forgiving when he makes mistakes. And even though, he fell short in areas, just like we all do all the time, God can still use him, And it's also a story of how God can use someone that is young and maybe other people have looked past you, but God doesn't look past people. And so, the storylines in this are so incredible. And so I'm just so excited for the world to be able to see this in such a fun, entertaining, uplifting, but yet biblical way. So thank you, Phil.
No, Tim, thank you, man. That's awesome. And by the way, I love your T-shirt. I think I need one of those. You're you're ahead of me already with that T-shirt. That's so cool. That shirt that Tim's wearing, the David logo, is actually the A in the David logo. Actually, comes from an archaeological find, which was part of the archaeological find was saying David. So it's literally the logo of an archaeological find. And yeah, Tim, that's an awesome T-shirt. Thanks for wearing that. So Tim, I mean, because you're such an amazing athlete yourself, if I had to ask you the question, what position would David play? What would you say and why, out of interest? If David was a footballer, what would he play?
That is so easy. It's easy. He would be a quarterback, not just because I'm biased and I like quarterbacks, but because David was a leader. You could see the way that he led, in so many different areas, from being young to, growing into being king to, making mistakes and then learning, growing and adapting from that. And, and I think, one of the things that is so important as a quarterback is you have to lead your team, lead the offense, but lead the entire team. And David was an incredible leader and a leader of men. And then to have mighty men, some of the greatest warriors maybe in history, yet they would be willing to do whatever it takes to bring David a cup of water, right? Now that's a leader of grown men, and that's pretty cool. So I think you'd be a quarterback.
I love that. And by the way, just leading into that water story that you were telling, for those people who don't know, I mean, I just want to lean into that leadership for 1 second, because for those of you who don't know, there were 3 men out in the desert with David, and they heard him say, I wish I could get a drink of water from the well in Bethlehem. But Bethlehem was at that point surrounded by a Philistine army. They didn't tell him. They went off through the night, fought their way through a Philistine army, and they drew him water and brought it back for him to drink. And Tim and I were actually chatting about this when he was in Cape Town, saying how David must have won their hearts. And that's incredible leadership, because he didn't command them. He didn't, like a king, he won their hearts, and they went to draw him water because they loved him. Right. And, Tim, I think that's what God does with us. He wins our hearts, and then we'll go do anything for him. We'll draw water from the well for him. And that's what I love about David's story is, and you talk about all those mighty men. Before David, we don't see any mighty men. And then he comes along in his generation. We read this huge list of mighty men. And, that's obviously how he inspired his generation. So I love what you're saying there about leadership. That's so awesome. Thank you. Yeah.
But I think it started because they saw something in him that they probably wanted in themselves, right? To be able to see a young boy go take on Goliath that everybody knows about, that everybody feared, that, King Saul is looking for a man that is courageous, that is going to stand up, and yet a boy is the one that is willing to do that in front of everybody, right? So that story isn't just something that we would have talked about. It's also something that would have spread among people in groups and groups and groups, and they would have talked about. So that story of David, but what's fascinating to me about it is the confidence that he has, not just to take on Goliath, but I believe when David goes down to the valley of Elah and he picks up the pebbles, and he picks up 5 pebbles, and this is just my interpretation, but why I think he picks up 5 is not because he thinks he might miss 4 times. I think he picked up 5 because historically, when you look at it, you have Goliath, but a lot of historians and scholars believe that Goliath had 4 brothers or relatives that were also giants, right? So he picked up 5 because he thought if his brothers or cousins or whatever relatives show up that are giants, guess what? I got something for you too. And it wasn't because of just his skill set, but it was because of his God set. Because his God was so big, and he believed that he was fighting on God's side. And so his confidence of, hey, God can protect me, and God has also equipped me by what he has called me for. And so I am not unequipped because God has put me in this position. And I think it's a mixture of what God had done in his life, the confidence of who was at his back, not the giant that's in front of him. And then all of that leading together is that he is reminded that, you know what, for such a time as this, that God can use you to do something incredible, and ultimately use him to do so many incredible things. But that just, to me, is such a fascinating picture that, if it was me, I have so little confidence at times that I would have had a bag of pebbles, and just in case I could keep throwing it. And yet he picks up 5, not because he's going to miss, but because it doesn't matter what giant showed up, his God's bigger than that giant.
I love that. I was reading a thing of Eugene Peterson's where he said when David entered the Valley of Eli, he entered with a God-dominated imagination, and everyone else had a Goliath-dominated imagination. So what you're describing is he walked there. I just think that's a beautiful way of saying it. He had such a God-dominated imagination and everyone else had this Goliath image and dominated imagination, and it's exactly what you're describing. And I love that. And going back to what you said, he was nobody. I mean, when they were trying to anoint, they said, have you 7 brothers come before him, and they said, have you got any more sons? We've got one, he's back in the field. They didn't even bring him to the anointing. But go fetch him. And I just love what you're saying. God doesn't overlook anyone at him. Anyone can be a David.
But it's also,
what you're saying.
Phil, it also reminds me of how many times in our life, how God uses in our life the times that we feel like we're in private or it's not a big deal, to one day use it in a big situation. Like God was training him what he felt like. Maybe it's like, dude, I don't want to be out here. This sucks. I'm lonely. I'm tired. But God was training and developing and equipping him for what he was getting ready to call him to, and that's what I love so much about the trailer. And it got me so hyped and so excited because, I love it because, and you have to take some liberties because we don't know every story. And so you're telling a fun story, but then you're showing at the end how, whatever animal is there, that he had to be ready to protect, his flock, whatever. And you know what? The Bible gives us a few examples, but honestly, there were probably so many more, right? So he is training and developing in private for what God was going to use in public. And I just think God also does that in our lives. Like we might think, why are we going through this? Why are we going through this? Why are we going through this? And God's like, I'm just hearing you what I'm getting ready to call you for.
No, that's amazing. I love that. I was saying to my kids the other day, if you look at Joseph, Moses, and David, Joseph had a dream, Moses had a calling, David had an anointing. Then they all go through this desert. Moses off to the desert for 40 years, Joseph off to slavery, David off to the wilderness. But God was working in their hearts through those times, as you say, for a moment that would come later, where the dream would be fulfilled, the calling would be fulfilled, and the anointing would happen. But sometimes you've got to go through these times where I think God is circumcising your heart to establish real humility. And then that does come true, though,
and also confidence in him. And also that personal relationship with him that is developed in private and then sometimes also lived out in public too, that you're walking with him in those moments, like we see in the trailer, which I love so much, those sometimes my wife Demi, she calls them God wink moments, when it's just like God shows up in those unique ways, and it's like they're just, you feel like it's a God wink moment, and that's so cool. Phil, I want to ask you, when you were like putting together that trailer, which gets me so excited for the movie, when you talk about the story of David, it is a massive story. It is a massive project, right? And there's so many things that you can pick and choose from. How do you even start to try to break it down?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. I mean, just to answer, the movie itself is going to tackle from when David is a shepherd boy right through to when he becomes king of Judah. And of course, the battle with Goliath is a massive part of the movie. But I also felt that's not where the story ends. So when we looked at his story, we thought we could tell a story from shepherd boy to Goliath. And you could actually tell a movie there that would be great. But there's so much more to learn and to really mine after that. So we've decided to tell the story right through to when he's king of Judah. But because I think it's what we've been talking about, those early days where you've got this like vision and this faith in God sometimes, then you hit some challenges. And if we tell this whole story, I think it's more holistic, if I can, excuse the pun, if I can say that. I think, but I loved his early days as well, because for me, I grew up in Africa in a country called Zimbabwe. And out in those outdoors, there were lion and there were elephants. And I think I've said in one of the other live streams, there's one beautiful river you could canoe in called the Zambezi River. And you can canoe for like 5 days, 4 nights. You won't see a human being. But that's where I really fell in love with David, because I knew he was a shepherd boy who grew up fighting lions and bears, sleeping under the stars. And those were amazing years in his life. So I really wanted to start telling the story from when he was out in the wild, because I think that's where he connected with the artist, Tim. And what I see in creation is the fingerprints of the artist. And that's why we wanted to start there. Yeah.
I think it's such important. You mentioned something that I just think maybe you can bring to life a little bit, because I think when people here in the U.S., they think, oh, oh, David, yeah, he killed his lions and his bears. Like, if people have ever seen a lion in real life,
Yeah.
you know that it is
Yeah.
terrifying. Like, I had the chance,
Yeah.
just a few months ago to see my first time seeing a lion that's literally right beside me. And I realized, like, oh my goodness, I know my life is not my choice right now. It is his choice. If he wants to eat me, I am
Yeah.
devoured, And
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
and how massive, and how you think about like David and preparing, how hard it is, to be able to defeat a lion and defeat a bear. Like, it just puts it into perspective. And so also, when the Bible talks about, that the
Yeah.
enemy prowls around like a roaring lion looking for,
Yeah.
those to devour, it just also puts it into perspective, And so it really, to me, kind of brings the Bible to life, and it also gives you even more appreciation for David.
No, it's incredible. I mean, I remember once being in the Zambezi, and this is what made me think about David, or one of the things, Tim. You can imagine your biggest, like strongest American football athlete, and then a lion is just that times 5 or 10,
Yes.
And how did David take them on? Because I was in the Zambezi, and sometimes lions do a mock charge, and the Zambezi's got these beautiful floodplains with some friends. There was nowhere to run, and this lioness mock charged us, and watching her come across the plains, just the way her muscles were just rippling. And she came to a halt just in front of us, like the dust hit us, but you looked into her eyes, and it was like these yellow flecked eyes, and you just knew, like you said, if she wanted to like sort you out, that the power in that animal is just incredible. And she did turn and walk off. She like looked at us, swished her tail, and then just walked off. But I was thinking, wow, David, when he speaks to Saul, says, when a lion came and attacked my sheep, I grabbed it by its hair, and I killed it. I was like, that's amazing. And
Yeah.
he must have really been, that was his school ground. That's where he learned. So he was ready for Goliath. By the time he got to Goliath, he knew what God could do.
No doubt. But I got to ask you, though, when the mock charge happened, were you terrified or what?
Yeah, for me, I grew up there, so it's more an adrenaline rush, actually. Just watching this animal come at you. And yeah, I think growing up in nature, you get to know how they work. So you can see it's a mock charge, but still the adrenaline that goes through your body when something like that happens it's amazing. Yeah, just to see the power of that animal, it's beautiful. Yeah, that's amazing. And I love what you're saying, and that's what his.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, please, you go ahead. You go ahead.
I was going to ask, just thinking about the trailer, and I love it. When you're trying to think, okay, I gotta try to encourage and rally a group of people to get around this project with, a 4-minute video, what in your heart and in your head was saying, okay, I'm going to pick and choose this as, something for everybody to rally around. Kind of what went into that process?
Okay. So I think the main thing about the trailer was, there's so much to tell about David's life, but what I really wanted to come across in that trailer was his heart. And, there's another story we know where Jesus goes after the one sheep that strayed. That's his heart for people. He just loves everybody. And he searches, will try and reach every single person. And what I wanted to get across in that trailer was not so much a rough, tough, like macho guy, but more his incredible heart. And so we thought if we could tell a trailer so people could see it's about God, and it's about falling in love with who David is. He's not Superman, not Spider-Man, but a human being who's got a beautiful heart. And what I love about that trailer, Tim, is the story of how he sacrifices his life for one little lamb. How he dives down that cliff. And I think that's what we were trying to get into that story. So when people watch it, they're like, "Oh, I can see where you're going with this." It's obviously action and it's adventure and it's fun, but actually, more than that, it's got heart.
That's right.
Yeah,
I think it's so. Yeah. I think it's so well said, and it's so well portrayed, because I do agree with you. Was David strong and athletic and fierce and a warrior? Absolutely. But the Bible is also very clear that God's heart is for the one And if with David being a man after God's own heart, then David would also have a heart for the one and going after Tally. And I love that, you know, and being able to, you know, put it all on the line for her, and then to see his you know, warrior spirit with his compassion all mixed together, and you know, the wind and the skies opening up, and then him singing. I think it did such a good job in a fast, you know, very short bit of bringing so many, you know, amazing aspects from David all in, which ultimately, you know, is, I think, one of the greatest things that could be said about someone is he's a man after God's own heart, which, you know, so obviously I think that's a great thing to portray about him.
Yeah, and one other moment, Tim, which I love, what you've been bringing out in earlier conversations, is when he's on the cliff. You can see he's human. He has that moment where he's like, oh, and then he looks out across the clouds. But in so many of David's psalms, we see how human he is, because he starts off just talking out his fear and his concern. And by the end of his psalm, you can feel he's refound his confidence in God again. And so the idea of that short was also to show his humanity. He's like, he really needed to take a moment to connect. And then he refound his bravery from that connection. His bravery was not... It's from a connection with God is where that comes from. And that's what I hope the demo also demonstrated, was that, you know, just bringing out that side of it. That his superpower is his faith in God,
It sure is. And, you know, I think it's something for all of us to learn from and be inspired from, because, you know, when you look at David, you just, you know, explained it so articulately. When you look at the story of David, it's not someone that necessarily always had it together. It's not someone that was always positive. It's someone that was so real and sincere and authentic and caring, and had a relationship with God that was so deep, that was also an honest relationship. Like, listen, we can never fool God. God already knows our thoughts, you know, and he knows them better than we do. So we can't, you know, try to articulate God in our conversations. And I think that is, you know, so important to be able to share and encourage people. And, you know, having confidence in God isn't that we ever doubt or wonder or question. It's that even when that happens, we still choose to trust him, even in the midst of that, even in the midst of not being sure why something is happening, or, you know, how is this supposed to work out, or how is God using all this for good, is we can still trust him because his character is trustworthy, even in the midst of everything we're going through.
Yeah. And Tim, I've got a quick question for you, because there's two things I hope that, well, more than two things, but two things I'll lean on to tonight, and that hope when people watch this movie, because everyone's got Goliaths in their lives, giants in their lives. Yes. And so I want to go with your question to you on that, and I will come back to the other part which you mentioned earlier about David was a man after God's own heart. But quickly going back, so if people watch this movie and they walk out, like, I really hope that they're inspired to go and know where to find their source of strength, but also to go and take on their giants. And I'd just love to hear from you tonight. I mean, you and your wife are fighting a lot of giants and a lot of great causes. You've obviously had a lot of personal giants to fight as an athlete. Is there one giant tonight you could just share with us that's like, you know, because often people have talked about you as like a modern day David. And how did you, one example of a giant in your life, and, you know, how did you connect with God and get through that, you know? If you're willing to share with us one example, either modern day one which you're fighting now, or back in past, or.
Yeah, thank you so much for, you know, even sharing the compliment. And first of all, I gotta say, I'm so far from being a David. David's a hero of mine, and I am just so far from that. But, you know, I do think in our lives we ultimately we see giants all the time, right? We have an enemy, and we have obstacles, and we have persecution, and we have negativities. And I'll just tell you, you know, one story of not too long ago of a young girl who was a wish kid of ours, that was, you know, her name is Marielle, and she's an amazing young girl, and she was a young girl that had some difficulties with their health, and it took a turn for the worst. And we're literally, she has, you know, no feeling in her lower body at her end days. And, you know, I'm over there at her house, and praying with her and her family, and we're talking and encouraging her, and she's just someone that has had so much faith her whole life, and so much faith, trusting God with it, even in the midst of these sucky times. And she has no feeling in her lower body, but every night she will have her mom or one of her friends or one of our team that would put these fuzzy socks on her feet. And I just had to ask her. I said, Muriel, why do you always have the fuzzy socks put on your feet when you have no feeling? So when you get in bed, you can't feel it anyways. And she said, yes, but I have them put on because I know when I finally can feel them, it's when I'm in heaven.
Wow.
And I just thought, wow, what perspective of such confidence in God, such hope with expectation about what God's going to do, about my home, about, where I'm going. And you know what? She was facing a massive giant, knowing, that giant being this illness, that giant being death, that giant being missing her family, that giant being not wanting to have to say bye to all her loved ones. But the hope, even in the midst of that, is that this isn't my forever home. I know where I'm going, and I can live with such confidence, expectation, and anticipation of what God is doing in the midst of all of this. And she was just such an example to me in the middle of that. And I've definitely had those giants in my life. And I think what is so important is when we face giants, that we have perspective of our God. Because what happens is when you face a giant, a lot of times you compare yourself to the giant and you think less than that giant. But where perspective comes in is when we compare the giant to our God. And then we gain perspective to say, you're not that big. The giant compared to me, oh, wow, you're massive. You're massive. When it's just me versus the giant, I lose. But when it's the giant versus my God, I win. And that's where I think perspective is just so important. And I know so many times in my life I've missed the mark, and I would compare myself to that obstacle, myself to that negativity, myself to that doubt, myself to but then where I'd regain it is when people in my life would help me compare that giant to my God, and that's when I gain confidence.
That's amazing. Sure. And that story you told us is, sorry, Tim, it's amazing. It's just so incredible. And thank you for what you shared after that. I'm going to quickly come back to David as a man after God's own heart. But before I go there, just to talk to the crowd or people on the live stream, that one of our visions, and this is what we also chat about with Tim when he's in Cape Town, is recently my wife and I went to Paris, and we walked around Paris. We went from the Eiffel Tower to the Louvre to Arc de Triomphe, 21 kilometers. And what I was struck by was the artisans of those centuries, their passion for scale and the attention to detail was just incredible. And we were saying, as filmmakers and creators, we can go out and make square blocks of factories or offices and churn money, or we can make projects like David, which are going to be these projects that are going to stand the test of time. And I'm really talking about eternity, not even human time. And that's right. But that's going to take immense focus and vision and faith. And what I want to say along that line is, this is where I think the Chosen has proved something beautiful. When community gets together behind a project, there's such power in there. And so I really want to say tonight, if you want to know how to support this project, you can go to angel.com/David and find out more about the project. But it's not just and you can actually potentially, if you pledge tonight, there'll become a time where you can possibly become a shareholder in the movie. But what's much bigger than that, because God will finance the movie, but is just the hearts of a crowd behind a project and a movement like this. And I was saying it, Tim, it's more than just a film. It's hopefully it's something that's going to do way more than just a film, and can turn into hopefully a Broadway musical and other things. But this power of getting people behind you as a team. I don't know if you want to talk to that, but I'm just super passionate about that side of building this movie.
Phil, I think maybe one way that I would explain it is this might be an avenue to bring the Bible to life in front of people all around the world for a couple of hours. And I think that is so special, is that we as believers have the opportunity to be able to rally around a project like this, to be able to invite our friends, to be able to invite our families, to be able to invite people all around the world here in our backyard of Florida and the U.S., but also all around the world, is we want people to be a part of this project. And so many people can relate to it wherever they're at in life. And it's something that, that Tangled and Frozen and all these movies have been able to bring families together. But now the families can come together and watch something that is safe for all of them, but also might bring them closer to the Lord, might be able to let families communicate on the story of David and the life of David and what it means to trust God and try to follow God and what it means to face giants and, our hope and our prayer. And we can't even possibly fathom all the things that we hope God can do with this. And we have no idea what he's doing, but we believe he's always at work and he's always doing something. And we're just praying he's going to use this in so many amazing ways, starting with your faith to take on such a massive project. And I just think, my heart is that we can rally so many people around it and, to say, hey, you know what, this is something exciting that maybe hundreds of millions of people will view. And out of that many, how many people might change their perspective on the giant they're facing? How many people might say, you know what, I'm gonna give God a chance, right? How many people are gonna say, maybe there's something to that faith that David had? Maybe there's gonna be a lot of people that are gonna watch that and say, you know what, I've been letting my giants conquer me, but I'm going to turn to God because my God is so much bigger than those giants. How many things are going to happen like that? And that's our prayer. And I know that's your prayer. It's not about making a great movie. It's about making a great movie that will impact many lives and ultimately impact eternity.
No, that's amazing. And one thing I wanted to lean in, I'll kick it off, Tim, and then I know time is getting a little bit short because you're going to need to go soon and we want to save a moment for some trivia. But talking about that verse from Acts, I found in David, son of Jesse, a man after my own heart. There's one thing I wanted to say about that, and then I'd like to hear your perspective on that. Because my reason for making this movie was when I read that verse, and I was at university, and so many of my friends were like, if they viewed God at all, they viewed him as an angry, austere, headmaster kind of character. But what I saw in nature out in the Zambezi River was this beautiful character who, in a thunderstorm and a little flower along the bank, this incredible adventure and fun and kindness and gentleness, just beyond description. And so David's heart is a man after God's own heart. So yes, we know he wasn't perfect, but I feel if we can tell the story well, it gives us a glimpse into God's own heart. And the other thing about David, which might surprise people, but I think one of the verses I love the most about Jesus is that he did not come into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world. And if I look at David's heart, it was a heart of kindness and embraced people. So when he was in the wilderness, Tim, which we know, it says everyone was in debt, distress, running from the law, gathered to David. And that tells us something about his heart. He had a heart for everyone, whether they were broken, in debt, if they were full of nonsense, or good. It didn't really matter. Just whoever you were, he just loved you. And I hope what comes out of this movie is an incredible sense of love. And that's because ultimately that is what God is about. And I don't know if you want to share, because you love David, I know you do, and your perspective of him being a man after God's own heart. Is there anything you want to add?
Well, I totally echo that, and I think it's it is something that has been challenging and inspiring for me for so long, because I think I'm so far from being there, but I want to choose to get there. You see, when I don't believe that he was a man after God's own heart because he was so different than everybody else. I think he was a man after God's own heart because he was willing. Right. And the question is, are we willing, to give it to the Lord, to have confidence in God, to choose God over our fears, to choose God? Like, all of us, can have the obstacles and the adversity, but we also have the choice. And are we willing to choose God and trust God in the middle of that hardship like David did? And that's something challenging. And I think personally probably missed the mark many times and don't want to miss it as much going forward. But when I think about, like what you said, when David is a man after God's own heart, and when you think about what David's heart is, and we think about what God's heart is, it's what the angel said. It's the good news of great joy that should be for all the people, right? Is Jesus came, for the good news of great joy, which should be for all the people. When we talk about Jesus and we talk about the reason that he came, he did so many amazing things and had these guys follow him and performed all these, 35 public miracles and all of this. But sometimes we forget the greatest reason that Jesus came was on a rescue mission for humanity, was to rescue us from something that we could not rescue ourselves from. That's what the cross is all about. The cross is a symbol of a rescue mission for us. That is God's heart. God loves us so much that he was willing to sacrifice his son so that we could be made right. That Jesus was the propitiation, the payment that satisfies, and he did satisfy. His perfect life, it is in that blood is what covers us from my messed up life. And I am just so grateful for that. So when we talk about God's heart is for us. For God so loved you and me that he gave his son. Like, that's how much he loved us, and so I agree with you. Some people think, oh, God's just this, this mean God that doesn't love us. Like, you would never say that if you knew someone that gave his son to sacrifice himself for you. You would never say that there was a person. But God gave his son. He's so loved that he demonstrated his love, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. It wasn't because of our actions. It was because of his heart. His heart is for us. It sacrificed for us. It demonstrated his love. He loves us so much. And he is also near to the brokenhearted. And you know what? When we think of God's heart, it is one that is for us. It is one that is near. It is one that has compassion. Over and over and over again, we see in Scripture that Jesus had compassion and he healed their sick and he met the needs. Jesus stopped. He had compassion and he stopped. Over and over, he had compassion. Jesus' heart was for compassion. God's is for compassion, and he demonstrated it. And it is also our job, our responsibility. And I also believe a command. It's a command from Jesus for us to go meet their needs as well, for people that are hurting all around the world. So God's heart is one that is full of love, and he demonstrated it over and over and over again. And that is something that we are also called to demonstrate.
That's amazing. I'm not going to try add to that because that's incredible. What I will say is that story is so powerful. I'm going to end with this and then go to a bit of trivia, Tim, and just thank you for your time. But I was going to say stories are so powerful because they carry what Tim's talking about. Stories have got this incredible ability to make accessible to people. And what I love about David's story is a very unifying character. Whether you Christian, whether you're Jewish, whether you don't believe in God, his story is a story that you can connect. And hopefully if you connect with his story, you'll find yourself connecting with the heart of God. But I won't try to repeat what you've just said, Tim. I think you did an amazing job. So the crowd, for people on this live stream, if you've got questions, feel free, before Tim leaves us, just to pop them through. In the meantime, I think the Angel Studios guys had a few trivia questions.
Yeah, come on, let's do it.
Just for a bit of fun. So, because it's Tim on the live stream, and how many football fields long is the Valley of Eli, where David fought Goliath? So we're talking about the width of it, not the length of it. So if you can start popping your answers to that question.
Let's see what you got.
So let's see what people come up with. So how many football fields long is the Valley of Eli? And we've actually done a bit of an exercise, so we've got an answer for that. I don't know, Tim, if you want to take a stab at that, or the guys at Angel Studios, are you getting any answers to this question? If you are, maybe you can post them.
I actually should know this because I've actually been fortunate enough to be there and stood in some of the spots that we think this would have taken place, and by a lot of people's best guess, it definitely would be quite a few football fields. Some. Probably around 10 or so, maybe.
Okay, so Tim's guess is 10. Let's see what other answers we've got. We've got 3 football fields. There's the Valley of Eli. 8.8. So Tim, you were close. Just to quickly say this, while this picture's on there, we've done 5 trips to Israel, Tim, because we're just so passionate about the authenticity and the accuracy of the movie. But while we're on the Valley of Eli, I just want to say, we had an archaeologist who showed us where the Philistines would have stood and where the Israelites would have stood. And okay, now we know it's 8.8 football fields. But as I walked, the river kind of oxbows away from where the Israelites stood. So it meant that David actually had to walk further away from his own army than he was. And quick story. As I went down into the river, the ambient sound of the doves and everything just faded away. And in the movie, I've got this amazing picture in my mind of as David goes down to get those 5 stones you talked about. Just ambient noise goes quiet. And then as he starts to walk out, you just build the noise of the army. Like, wow. So, yeah, I think visiting Israel was the most, and you've been there as well, most amazing experience.
I got goosebumps just from you telling that story, man. I got goosebumps just from that. That is awesome. Wow.
So let's move on to our next trivia question. What is faster? I think we're going to add something to this question. So firstly, what is faster, throwing a football or a slingshot slotting a rock?
That's
and
easy.
You can guess
that's easy.
But maybe we can try guess the speeds of the top speed you can throw a football at, and I'm sure Tim will be the most accurate to answer that. And then what speed you think a slingshot is moving at when it's up?
My guess would probably be like throw a football, probably around 70 miles an hour, 65, 70.
Right, amazing. Wow. Okay. And we'll see what the crowd, and a slingshot. What do we reckon for a slingshot? Like
200 miles an hour, maybe.
Okay. So let's see if you guys got any answers from people on the live stream for us. So rock, so slingshot rock. What's the speed? Okay, slingshotting a rock. They're saying that'll be the fastest. So we all agree on that. I guess the question is, what speed do you think the slingshot goes at? Okay, every recording. You were close, Tim. 60 miles. Yeah. Do you reckon you can throw it faster?
I don't know.
And there's a slingshot.
Holy cow. That is fast.
445.9 miles an hour. Wow.
Holy cow.
So that thing is like
a slingshot could go that fast. Wow.
Yeah. And by the way, when we were there, we looked at that slice of a stone that they use in a slingshot is just a little bit smaller than a tennis ball. So you can imagine that thing moving at 445 miles an hour. That's incredible. Yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
That's actually
and then we've got 2 more. Yeah, it's amazing. So Goliath didn't know what hit him when that thing hit him.
I believe that.
Yeah. So which has more people, the Philistine Army or the Broncos Stadium? Tim, do you know how many people roughly fit into the Broncos Stadium before we answer that?
Yeah, I think so. Probably around 70-something thousand when I was there. Probably.
Okay, that's amazing. In our rugby stadiums in South Africa, we get about 45,000. It depends on the stadium a little bit, and that's incredible. I mean, just to be in that. So I'd love to be at the stadium with 75. That's must be.
Phil, you got to see some of the college games then, because there's a few of the stadiums that are having. Let's see, 110, 115,000 people at a few of the college games. So, yeah.
That's incredible. Wow. Okay. That's amazing. And so there's our answers. And Broncos Stadium, maybe we'll put up the answer of how many people were in the Philistine Army. So Broncos Stadium, 76,000. And the Philistine Army, the numbers we had were 30, probably even up to 40,000. So it's about half a stadium load that David was having to face, like on his own. So if you can just picture him facing one half of the Broncos Stadium.
That's scary.
That's amazing. Then the Black Sheep was. Then, okay, how many trophies does Tim Tebow have? Has he championships? How many national championships has Tim Tebow won? Well, obviously,
I love how
obviously Tim will know the answer to this.
That the Philistine Army probably didn't have luxury boxes. Probably not, Brad. Probably not.
Yeah. So is there anyone on the live stream who knows how many national championships Tim Tebow's won out of interest? Finish it off. Okay, well we can pop the answer there. And Tim, you must remember those well. What years were those and tell us quickly what they were?
2006 and 2008. Almost won it in 7 and 9 too, but we fell a little bit short. But 2006 and 2008, and so they were amazing memories, and so fortunate to be a part of some great teams.
And which was more special for you, 2006 or 2008, or were they equal?
That's like I mean, I don't have any kids, but I imagine it's like choosing between, no, it's not near that important. But they're, both super special. I mean, gosh, I mean, maybe 2000. I don't know. Too hard to pick. Too hard to pick. You got to tell me, out of all your movies you've done, which one's your favorite?
Well, the movies I've watched, I'd say Gladiator would be my favorite. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and you? What would be your favorite movie?
Braveheart.
Braveheart. Okay, I was close because mine is like first is Gladiator, second is Braveheart. Yeah.
I like it.
Okay, so the last question is, how many years has the David movie been in progress? So obviously I know the answer to that one, but I don't know if anyone wants to hazard a quick guess. And then we can go to questions, and then we must let, so 1.9 years?
1.9 years. There you go. 3 years.
3 years? Okay.
7.
And 7. Okay, Garrett. Okay, Garrett's getting closer. So very quickly, the answer is actually 20 years, because the whole idea was ignited 20 years ago. So quickly back to the beginning of our live stream, animated feature films typically take 4 to 7 years to make. But for me, this was ignited 20 years ago, and I started building team and pipeline. Everything we built, the Jungle Beat series, everything was building towards the David movie. So we've probably been in production now for 2 to 3 years, but it's been getting built for 20 years. So it's really cool to have you joining our story and journeying the rest of the way with you, Tim. It's exciting.
Well, we're grateful for what you're doing and for the what God has put on your heart, and it's just I think it's going to be a massive, massive encouragement to so many people, and it's something that's going to be so awesome for people to take their friends and family to, and just so excited to see what God does with it.
Tim, thank you. And I'm going to let you go because you've given us more than enough time, but I just want to say a big thank you. And for me personally, the thing that really comes through talking to you and meeting you is your humility and your love of God. It's just awesome. So thank you, and thank you for being an adventurer with us on this journey. We really appreciate it. So thank you.
Well, I'm honored to be a part of it, just a tiny part, but really just I'm a cheerleader for you and the team and everything that y'all are doing. And, I'm just grateful for y'all's vision, and just want to rally as many people to support and pray and believe in this, and then tell as many people and tell their friends and bring them to the movie theaters when this thing is released, and let's go impact the world.
Yeah, thank you. Our goal with the Angel Guys is to make this the most watched animated theatrical movie of all time. We really want it to be in Asia, in Africa, in Europe, and of course in the US and South America, and maybe Australia. No, I'm joking. I've got a few friends in Australia. But but we really want to make it global. And thanks, Tim, because it's really cool to have you on the journey with us. Thank you. And thanks for your time today as well.
Absolutely. So look forward to doing it again. Thank you for what you're doing. Everybody that's listening, we love for you to be a part of this with us. It's exciting, and we want to walk by faith and see what God does.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. And if I'm going to stay on and take questions, so if any of you have got questions, you're welcome to post questions. But Tim's given us a good hour, so we're gonna let him run. And Tim, thank you again.
Well, have a appreciate good day. You, brother. Thank you so much, and everybody, thanks for being a part of it. God bless y'all.
Thanks, Tim. Cheers, So for anyone on the live stream, if there are any questions, we can have a look at them quickly. Otherwise, it was such a privilege to have Tim. Okay, we've got a few questions. Will Tim be voicing one of the characters? Maybe a sheep. Yeah, I think that's a great question. He should have stayed on the live stream for this question. And so I'll pose that question to him and see if he would like to be a voiceover of a sheep. That's a great question, Ryan. Thank you. Yeah, so quickly on the voiceover, we are definitely going to be looking for voiceovers and casting. A quick thing on the philosophy of that, we really want it to be super authentic. So when we're casting for all the Israelite roles, we're going to try and work and find people of Jewish origin and Jewish descent. They don't have to live in Israel. But the net we're going to cast is to try and find people from that group because it just feels authentic. If you look what they did on Moana, for example, or the movie Coco, they really went and found voiceovers that were authentic to that geography and time. Obviously, there are other characters, like there's the Philistines and there's the Amalekites, but most of the characters, your hero characters, are obviously from Israel. And so one of our goals, just very headline, is to cast. And we are going to be casting, and you can watch on social media to see when we go about casting. It'll probably be next year. So if your social media pages, you'll pick up about casting there. And we can see, is David going to be the only one who sings in the movie? No, he's not actually. I don't want to give too much away. I will say one thing is that in the movie, his mother plays an incredible role, and she's in our movie, and I believe also in real life. Just remember, his great grandmother was Ruth, and there's a psalm where he said, "I want to serve God like my mother did." So there's in our story, she's an amazing character, and there is one scene, for example, where she sings a duet with David. So he'll be the main singer, but not the only singer. And there's a few other things, but I won't give them away now because they'll maybe give a bit too much of the movie away. But he's not the only one, but he will be the main singer, obviously, because he was so musical. And we know he wrote half the songs, but not the only one. Yeah. Oh, how can we get an Angel t-shirt? That's a good question. In fact, I'll have to post something on that on social media tomorrow. And maybe the Angel team can post the answer to that if they're listening in onto this question. I also want one like Tim, and I know just so you know, on besides t-shirts, we're going to create some beautiful journals, some beautiful caps, and some beautiful t-shirts. And we'll start posting on social media where those can be found. But we are going to partner with Angel to make those available. And so if you watch our social media, we'll post about that as we go. So if you go to Instagram or Facebook page and join it and watch that space, and I'll try and get someone to post about that in the next day or two about where you can find that. And we've got we're trying to just go quality, not quantity. So for example, on the t-shirts, I'll just say one thing I know, we're going to go for black shirts and Techlit blue shirts. So Techlit blue was a very specific color that goes back to Bible times, and it was the blue that they used in Israel. So we're going to be doing blue t-shirts. It's a Techlit blue, and then black initially, and just those two colors initially. But yeah, if you watch social media, we'll start posting a whole lot of information on the leather journals, the caps, and the t-shirts. When does the movie come out? That's a great question. So if funding goes well, we aim to finish the movie at the end of 2024, and then we'll release the movie in 2025. And just to say, this movie is definitely getting made for cinema. So that is our goal. Of course, it will flow after cinema down to streamers and to that kind of distribution. But we really want this to be a theatrical cinema release. I know that's not the question, but just putting that out there as well while we're talking about it. And we'll just see if there's any more questions. Okay, so God bless your team. How does one contribute? So if you want to contribute, the way you can go and look is go to angel.com/David. As I was saying at the beginning, we're actually in a pledging phase at the moment, in a testing the waters phase. So you can, if you can show interest there, you can put down your name and your email address, and then from there, once we get approval and we can go to a proper, we've done one crowdfunding round already. When we go to the next one, then you'll be contacted, and at that point, that's when you'd be able to invest. But in the meantime, you can go to angel.com/David, and there's a lot of information about the movie there and what it would mean if you do get to invest, like how does it work, and lots more about the project. And also, if you do have questions, you're welcome to put them on our social media channels as well. So apparently that was the last question. I just wanted to end off and say thanks to Tim. It was really amazing to have him on the live stream, and he's such an amazing example of someone who's living an authentic, if I can call it in inverted commas, David life, although he was very humble to say he's not like David, but he really is an amazing person who sets an amazing example for us. And so a big thank you to Tim, and for the fans of Tim who are watching, I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you want to come on the adventure with us, we'd love you to join us. And you, as I was saying, you can go to angel.com/David to join. So we're going to end off by just showing you in case you weren't at the beginning, we're just going to show you the little 5-minute animation that we did that's going to show you kind of the heart and style of the animation. So if you didn't see it at the beginning, you'd like to stay on now, you can watch it, and that'll give you a sense of the DNA of the movie we're going to make. So thank you so much for joining us today, and I really appreciate your time. In this modern world, time is short, and we really value you giving us your time and going on this journey with us. So thank you, and have a wonderful day or evening, depending where in the world you are.
Look into my eyes. Do you see fear? You come at me with sword and spear, but I come in the name of the God of Israel. Yes! Right between the eyes! Did you see that? Anyone? Of course not. Okay then, one more time. Tally, now! I'm trying to protect us from this Philistine. Whoa! No, not that way. Come on. Back to your mom. Right, Philistine. Oh, wait! Right between the eyes. Oh, of course. That one you saw. Tally! Tally, no! I'm coming, girl! Whoa, easy! Shira! I will bring her home safely. Tally, wait, no! There you go. I'm almost in. Okay. Oh! Tally, stop! No! Oh! That doesn't help. That does. Stop! Thank you. Yena haleni nafshi yeshobeh yancheni b'mgalet tzedek come on, share.